Hello, and welcome back to another update where we cover the latest developments in the war between Israel and Gaza. So, in this one, we are seeing some developments in the airstrikes as well as in the attacks of Israel towards Gaza. Most of the fighting has moved outside of Israel and into Gaza, with the airstrikes and the missile strikes being the only confrontation between the two sides. There's no more reports of direct confrontations between Israeli forces and Hamas forces. There are very few cases, but they are separate and they are essentially not at a scale at which we can say there's actual fighting within Israel. So with this latest developments, we're seeing that the full focus is now towards Israel's next move, because the next one is the determining one. Will they launch this ground offensive or not? And when will they do it, and so on. So to give credit to the fact that they will happen and they will launch a ground offensive, they have announced that the Palestinians in northern Gaza must retreat out of it. They must evacuate it. They must leave. They reported on this yesterday, and they gave a 24-hour window for the Palestinians to leave this northern part. This is a long or major area of about 1.1 million civilians living in this area, and giving them only 24 hours is almost impossible, if not definitely impossible, for all of these civilians to evacuate. One of the hospitals here in the central parts, according to the staff working there, reported that Israel has given them in Al-Awda hospital just 2 hours to evacuate. Our staff are still treating patients, which is a very difficult situation. And they then go on to say, we unequivocally condemn this action, the continued indiscriminate bloodshed and attacks on healthcare in Gaza. We are trying to protect our staff and patients. So that is their point of view. They then give an update and clarification. The Israeli forces have now postponed the demand to evacuate Al-Awda hospital in the Gaza Strip until 6 a.m. The evacuation of patients remains complicated. So this is a terrible situation for MSF International and the healthcare professionals working in this area to help save lives of the civilian population in Gaza. So this is the current situation here in the northern parts of Gaza City, as the Israelis keep delaying the evacuation time. They're giving them a very tight schedule so that they evacuate as fast as possible, but it seems that they are willing to extend it when it hasn't been completed. So we are most likely seeing that the Israelis are waiting to launch their ground offensive until after the civilians have left the northern area. The northern and southern area are separated by this river here that goes through the center, so I've outlined it here. So this whole area is expected to be evacuated, and the Israelis are most likely waiting until it is fully evacuated before they launch their ground offensive. This leads to one thing, and that is that the Israelis are most likely going to do this in the south as well. So most likely what we're seeing is that the Israelis are going to wait until the civilians leave the northern part of Gaza. Then they will launch a ground offensive, after which they will try to capture the whole northern part of Gaza. And then they will request the southern parts to evacuate into Egypt, so that they can take the rest of it. And in the end, they would have control over all of Gaza with no civilians there, which makes it easy for them to annex. So most likely we're seeing a Israeli plan to annex all of Gaza to end this 70-year-long conflict between the Israelis and Palestinians in this area. If they get rid of all the Palestinians, push them into Egypt, then they have nothing to worry about, essentially. And this theory isn't just empty words, because we know based on the past that Netanyahu and Mubarak has multiple times throughout history, the Egyptian leader, former leader was Mubarak, him and Netanyahu have multiple times throughout Netanyahu's time as prime minister in Israel talked about peace in Gaza, how Israel needs to deal with the Gaza problem. And in a recording from 2006, Mubarak said to Netanyahu that no Egyptian leader will ever accept that the Palestinians leave Gaza into Egypt and that Israel takes Gaza as a result of that. We are now seeing, however, that this conflict is forcibly pushing the Palestinians out of Gaza towards Egypt with the utter destruction of these airstrikes. And to just give a clear overview over this destruction with the airstrikes, we have this video here which gives a visualization of the bombing of the Gaza Strip. We start out in the northeastern parts where we see these videos of utter destruction within the city. Then we see this video here in the northwestern parts, more airstrikes, more destruction, missile strikes, and so on. As for the western part, we see here again massive airstrikes. We also see how it's mostly centered about the northern parts. We see here right next to the river line, more destruction, more airstrikes, more missile strikes. And then we see some by the port, in the Gaza port, in the southwestern parts. And then we see here in the southern parts, multiple airstrikes as well. However, much less than in the northern parts. And then we see this whole area of utter destruction throughout the whole country. So the Israelis are not just bombing one place at one point, they're precisely planning where to bomb at what time to completely destroy everything they believe to be a threat to themselves. As they keep saying, Israel is just defending themselves by destroying all of Gaza. So with 1.1 million Palestinians at least displaced from their homes, we now see this war going into a new stage where we're seeing that the Israelis are heavily preparing for their ground offensive. They haven't launched it yet because at the very least they have the humanity to wait until the Palestinians are leaving and then going on the offensive once most of civilians have left. And then they blame Hamas if any civilians get killed in the north after this evacuation, because Hamas has told them not to withdraw, because this is a trap by the Israelis. Of course, Hamas has an interest in delaying this as much as possible so that they have more time to prepare. The Hamas has about 40,000 soldiers in Gaza, and they are about to face 500,000 Israeli soldiers. They need as much time to prepare as possible. Otherwise, you'll have a very, very difficult fight ahead of them. Regardless of how much you prepare, they have a very, very difficult fight ahead of them. But then again, we cannot decide the war before it takes place, because this is essentially 2 million people worth of houses, urban area. And if we compare it to the Russian invasion of Chechnya in the First and Second Chechen Wars, we see that although one side has vastly superior everything to the other side, it doesn't mean that they have a quick victory. And we can say the same in Afghanistan, we can say the same everywhere else, where major powers have attacked smaller countries with immense advantages, yet end up in a forever war because they're unable to take down everything. The Israelis have essentially used more bombs, missiles, and explosions in less than a week than what the United States used in a year in the war in Afghanistan. It is to the point that the Israelis have already requested and received more ammunition for their planes and missiles stash from the United States. So based on all of this information, we can see that this war is clearly not fair. Then how come Hamas wanted to start this war? That is what we'll find out once the Israelis launch their ground invasion, because it is basically guaranteed now. Will we see that the Hamas actually prepared for a long drawn-out war, essentially like the Chechen wars, where they rely on the urban areas to essentially drag out this conflict as much as possible and inflict as much damage on Israel as possible? Or was there something else planned? Were they hoping for external help? What exactly was the situation? We don't know what their plans were, but one thing is for sure, they don't look like they're willing to give up anytime soon. So this war will likely last a long time, similar to what the Israelis are saying and preparing for. And that is going to be all for this update. Thank you all for watching and have a great day.